Dr. Humer and Nate, is improbability a reason for rejection? Before we move on to the simulation, it's improbable that your brain in a vat, whether broadly construed or narrowly construed, is that a reason to reject the brain in a vat hypothesis?
Sounds like a reason to reject, right? I mean, unless you're asking a much more subtle question than it sounds like. Yes.
Don't. Yeah, it's not as subtle. I just thinking for people who are listening, there's they do the Dumb and Dumber GIF where it's like, so you're saying there's a chance, right? For a lot of people, when you say probability, so there's still this probability. It's still probable, or it's not probable.
It's possible.
It's just it's possible, but
Improbable.
yeah, it's very, very improbable. Like, and what we're talking about here is so much so that you could say we're not living. You're not a brain in a vat.
Right. It would be so. It's rational to believe that you're not a brain in a vat, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's still possible, whatever. Okay, but think about things like, sometimes you hear after you learn about thermodynamics, you hear that it's possible that all the air in this room could spontaneously migrate into the corner and then I would suffocate.
Right.
Oh, okay, we need to worry about that. No, we don't need to worry about that. Okay, so that is possible. The probability of that is non-zero, but nobody should ever worry about that happening. Okay. It has never happened, and it's not going to happen before the sun swallows up the earth, right? In the time that we have left.
That's good. I actually never had that fear until right now. So thanks for adding.
There are ways to motivate the idea that maybe improbability isn't sufficient for rejection, right? And I think some of those ways are actually considered in this paper. So, I mean, here's one way to motivate this idea. So here's a case. I roll some dice, and they land under the couch. I don't see them. Really, really improbable they landed snake eyes. Am I reasonable to believe it didn't roll snake eyes?
It's 1 over 36. It's not that improbable. So.
But I mean, like once you start, yeah, right. When you say 1 in 36, it sounds like like what Parker was saying. The whole you're saying there's a chance sort of reasoning I think really kicks in. But there are different ways of actually expressing that probability, right? Like 0.9 something chance it didn't. And now I'm kind of like, oh, wait a minute. 0.9 is sufficient in other settings for me. So why wouldn't it be in this setting? Yeah. There are conflicting intuitions about what probability can do, right?
Yeah. So
I'm just curious.
So, clearly you should have a low credence that it landed double ones or that it landed snake eyes. Should you outright believe that it didn't? I don't know. Probably not, I guess. Right. But there's an interesting question about why sometimes we just form the outright belief and it doesn't entirely supervene on the probability. So there could be cases where you outright believe P and, you don't outright believe Q, but Q is more probable than P. Okay, well, what could explain this? Well, there are these different pragmatic factors. So when you form the outright belief, so that is not just having a high credence, it's taking, a further attitude. The further attitude includes something like, well, I've closed the inquiry into this question, so I'm not going to be worrying about it anymore or something like that. That doesn't mean that it won't ever be reopened, right? But it does mean that you're now not deliberating about whether that's true. And when you decide to make decisions, another thing that's sometimes said is when you decide to make decisions, you will just use the proposition. You won't use the probability of the proposition in your reasoning. Like I'm trying to decide what to do, I'll just use P in the proposition. I won't use probability of P is over 97%. So anyway, okay, so there are things like that. And so when is it rational to form the outright belief? Well, when it's rational to have those other attitudes, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, that could depend upon things like, how costly is it to gather more information? Because if it's super easy to gather more information, then don't close the inquiry, right? But if you've got all the information you're ever going to have, then that tends to push down the threshold for closing the inquiry, right? Also depends upon what the costs and benefits are. Like if there's a huge cost to being wrong, then that pushes the threshold up.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. So if I start having a life that looks more and more like Elon Musk's, is the inquiry sort of like opening again? And so now I should think of the brain in a vat hypotheses in the same way that I think of the proposition that the dice landed snake eyes?
I mean, I think it would take more than that, right?
Okay.
There's some point. So, you know, like how people say there's no way of refuting the brains-in-vats scenario, in the sense that like there's not a test that definitively shows that you couldn't be brain-in-a-vat. But I mean, there is. Like there's stuff that could happen to you. It's just that, so there's stuff that could sorry, I meant to say there's stuff that could happen that would suggest that you are a brain in a vat. It just never happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like you could experience what look like glitches in the program or whatever, you know, like the world freezes for a second, right? And then like an error message appears in your visual field, or whatever. Right? Or you know how like when you're streaming a video and you don't have enough bandwidth, and then you know stuff happens like the quality of the video goes down, or like you know the frame rate goes down, so like it doesn't look like it's moving continuously anymore. Right? Yeah. The stuff like that could happen. It's just that stuff never happens, right? So
yeah. So maybe maybe it needs to be like more extreme than becoming like Elon Musk. It's got to be like my experience all of a sudden like pauses and it says buffering or something like that. Then I should start to be like, okay, maybe I should reopen the
yeah. Right. And then like, you know, maybe a message appears in the screen that says, sorry, you know, we're working on the error. You know, we're very sorry, you know, we know you've probably forgotten that you signed up to be put into the vat, but anyway, but still we take our customer satisfaction very seriously.
That's good. That's like there's a movie in Vanilla Sky where that happens to Tom Cruise. Spoiler alerts for anyone who wants to watch that. So